The prison gate didn't creak when it opened. It gave one quiet click, and after 730 days, I stepped into the rain carrying a folded release form and enough anger to last the rest of my life. My name is Clifford Wolf. I'm 71 years old, and for 2 years I answered to a number because my own son stood before a judge and swore I had shoved his pregnant wife down a flight of stairs. I never laid a hand on her. But his lie was enough to put me behind bars, and by the time I walked free, I knew one thing between my son and me. Somebody was going to lose everything. I just didn't know yet that it wouldn't be me. Bradley was waiting outside the gate, in a suit worth more than some used cars. Beside him stood Kayla, holding a baby wrapped in gray fleece, while 3 photographers snapped pictures like this with some carefully staged family reunion. Bradley opened his arms. "Dad, welcome home." I didn't move. His smile stayed frozen as he leaned closer. Smile. The board is watching the coverage. Unless you want everyone seeing you as homeless and bitter. Then Kayla stepped forward and tilted the baby toward me. "This is Owen. He's been dying to meet his grandfather." The boy was 3 months old. He wasn't dying to meet anyone. He was hungry, exhausted, and probably the only honest person standing there. I looked at Kayla for a second, then walked straight past her. The cameras went wild. Bradley grabbed my sleeve. I stared at his hand until he released me, then headed toward a rusted Buick parked at the curb. Nathaniel stood beside it in a raincoat, holding an umbrella over the passenger door while letting the rain soak his own shoulders. "You're going to regret this," Bradley shouted behind me, his polished public voice finally cracking. "The house is mine. The company is mine. You've got nothing." I climbed into Nathaniel's Buick. The inside smelled like old coffee and 40 years of friendship. He looked me over. "You look like hell." I shut the door. "I feel incredible." For once, I meant it. Nathaniel didn't drive me home because I didn't have one anymore. The German village house where I'd spent 30 years of my life was now in Bradley's name, and I wasn't about to ask my son for permission to sleep under a roof that used to belong to me. Nathaniel found me a room at the Excelsior Motel on South High. "It's not the Ritz," he warned. "I've slept in worse." I glanced at him. I just got out of it. The motel room smelled of carpet cleaner layered over cigarettes smoked years before anyone bothered hanging a no-smoking sign. I sat on the edge of a sagging bed while Nathaniel opened a thick folder and spread the documents across the blanket like evidence at a crime scene. I thought I already understood how badly Bradley had gutted my life while I was locked away. Then I saw the numbers. I was wrong by nearly $4 million. 6 months into my sentence, my lake house had been sold for roughly 60 cents on the dollar. The buyer looked legitimate until Nathaniel traced it back to a shell company Bradley controlled. Then came the next line. My '67 truck, the one I had restored with my own hands, was gone too, shipped off to an auction house in Cincinnati. Nathaniel pointed to the one thing Bradley still hadn't managed to take from me, my 41% stake in Wolf Building Supply. Legally, it was still mine, protected only because Nathaniel had fought for an injunction while I was being processed at Chillicothe. Then his expression changed. "There's one more thing." He told me about Patty Ruiz, the accountant who had signed off on the trust paperwork. She'd quit 2 weeks earlier and disappeared without leaving a forwarding address. But before she vanished, she mailed an envelope to Nathaniel's office with my name on it. He handed it to me. I turned it over in my hands but didn't open it. Not yet. There was something I needed more than another bank statement. "Tell me what really happened the night Kayla fell." Nathaniel lowered himself into the motel's only chair. I had gone to Bradley's house to discuss merger paperwork. Bradley and I argued in the kitchen, and Kayla, 6 months pregnant, came downstairs to break it up. At the top landing, her heel caught on a loose runner. She fell 4 steps before grabbing the railing. I remembered that runner. I had warned Bradley and Kayla twice to nail it down. They never did. Then I asked the question that had followed me through every night in prison. "She didn't lose the baby that night, did she?" Nathaniel shook his head. Kayla lost the pregnancy 11 days later. At the follow-up appointment, her obstetrician found no injury consistent with the fall, and nothing medically connecting the miscarriage to what happened on those stairs. Bradley had already called the police the night she fell. Kayla told them I had shoved her, and Bradley backed her story. That was enough to get me arrested. But 11 days later, When the medical report failed to support what they were claiming, neither of them corrected a word. They kept pushing the same story. Kayla repeated it under oath. Bradley stood behind her. By the time my case reached a jury, they weren't looking at a loose rug anymore. They saw an angry father arguing with his son, a pregnant woman accusing him of pushing her down the stairs, and a husband confirming her story. The medical report created doubt, but doubt wasn't enough to undo the story Bradley and Kayla had spent months building around me. I was convicted, and they watched me disappear behind prison walls, knowing the evidence never proved what they claimed. I sat there staring at Nathaniel. 2 years. 2 years of my life because Kayla lied about a fall caused by a runner I had warned them to fix, and my own son chose to protect that lie even after the medical evidence gave him every opportunity to tell the truth. Nathaniel didn't need to say anything else. I finally tore open Patty Ruiz's envelope. 3 bank statements slid onto the bed, followed by a yellow sticky note covered in hurried handwriting. He made me do it. Ask about the Cedar Street account. I read it once, then again. Bradley hadn't just taken my freedom. Whatever Patty had discovered suggested he had been moving money too. For the first time since walking through those prison gates, my anger had somewhere to go. Looks like we've got somewhere to start. The Anchor Diner looked exactly as I remembered it: cracked red booths, worn counters, and a bell above the door that never rang properly. The woman pouring coffee was new. Monica Diaz, 34, tired eyes, crooked name tag, moving through her shift like she had somewhere better to be. She recognized me before I even sat down. "You're Mr. Wolf. You used to tip like the recession never happened." I took the coffee. "I used to have money to tip with." She almost smiled. Then she glanced toward the kitchen and leaned closer. "Your son comes in here sometimes. Him and a guy from the bank. They don't think anybody listens to waitresses." That got my attention. Nathaniel stopped stirring his coffee. "What have you heard?" I asked. Monica lowered her voice. 3 accounts. Company money moving somewhere it shouldn't. I know enough about numbers to know they don't add up. She hesitated, then added, "And I know what guilt looks like when a man needs a second drink at 10 in the morning." I looked at Nathaniel. He was already thinking what I was thinking. Patty had given us 1 account to investigate. Monica had just told us there might be 2 more. In that moment, Monica Diaz stopped being the woman pouring my coffee. She became my first witness. I let Monica's words hang over the table. Across from me, Nathaniel had stopped moving entirely. "Would you say all of that in a deposition?" I asked. Monica didn't hesitate. "I've got a daughter and a landlord who raises the rent every March. I'll say it anywhere that pays my bills and doesn't get me fired from a job I already hate." I liked that answer. Honest, practical, and with very little left to protect. I asked why someone sharp enough to recognize money being moved through hidden accounts was serving coffee instead of working in accounting. Her jaw tightened. She'd once been a staff accountant for a used car dealership on the west side. While reviewing the books, she discovered the owner was skimming customer down payments, mostly from older people trading in aging cars for something easier to drive. Monica reported him. He fired her before the state finished its investigation, then poisoned every reference afterward until nobody in the county wanted to hire her. She still had the qualifications. What she didn't have was anyone willing to give her another chance. "Turns out honesty is a great way to end up serving coffee," she said. Monica had already fought against crooked books once and paid for it. This time, I intended to put her on the winning side. "Suppose I need someone who knows how to read cooked books and isn't afraid to explain them under oath. Would that interest you more than the lunch shift?" Monica studied me like she was deciding whether I was serious, desperate, or insane. "Depends what it pays, and whether you're planning to get me fired from this job too. When I'm finished, you won't need this job." She didn't accept. She didn't refuse either. She simply topped off my coffee without being asked, and that was enough for me. 4 days after I walked out of prison, Bradley made his next move. In Columbus, the Wolf name still meant something, especially to anyone who remembered seeing it stamped across construction trailers from downtown to Grove City. Bradley knew that if I started asking questions, people might listen. So before I could publicly accuse him of anything, he called a reporter and gave them a story of his own. At 7 that morning, my phone buzzed on the motel nightstand. The headline was already spreading: "Wolf Family Speaks Out. Son concerned about father's mental state after release. I read Bradley's statement twice. He told the reporter that prison had changed me, that the family loved me, and that they were worried I might hurt myself or someone else. Then came the line that mattered. Bradley said they were considering whether a guardianship might be in my best interest. I stared at that word. Guardianship. He wasn't just trying to humiliate me. He was laying the foundation to have a court declare me incapable of managing my own affairs and possibly take control of the one thing he still hadn't stolen. My 41% of Wolf building supply. Nathaniel called before I finished reading the article for the third time. He skipped hello. He knows we're coming. I figured. This is bigger than bad press, Clifford. If Bradley files for guardianship and convinces a judge you're unstable, he could ask the court to freeze your voting shares before we ever put the embezzlement evidence in front of anyone. Bradley had already taken 2 years of my freedom. Now he was trying to make sure that even outside prison, I still wouldn't be allowed to control my own life. Clifford, this isn't posturing anymore. It's a real threat. I sat on the edge of the motel bed with Bradley's interview open in front of me and finally admitted how close he was to winning. He'd had 2 years to prepare while I had a cot, 4 walls, and nothing but time to replay every mistake I'd ever made with him. Bradley wasn't stupid. I had spent most of his life underestimating him, and every time I did, I paid for it. What do we need to stop the guardianship before it reaches a judge? Proof, Nathaniel said. Something undeniable on paper. If he gets you into court first and turns this into his word against yours, especially with cameras outside, he controls the story. My eyes went to Patty Ruiz's note on the nightstand. Ask about the Cedar Street account. Then let's ask. Nathaniel brought in a forensic accountant he trusted, and the next 4 days were nothing but bank records, wire transfers, property filings, and corporate registrations. No dramatic confrontations, just numbers. But numbers don't care whose son you are. Eventually, they led us from Wolf Building Supply to the Cedar Street, holding account, then south to an LLC that owned a condominium in Sarasota. Bradley had been siphoning money out of the company for nearly 18 months. On paper, the Florida property was listed as a regional sales office. In reality, it had a swimming pool, a boat slip, and no sales staff. Monica confirmed the last part herself, digging through public tax and payroll records during a slow shift at the diner. Not a single employee had ever been paid from that address. She slid her phone across the booth. $320,000 in the last year alone, and that's only what I can prove right now. I stared at the number. Bradley had spent 2 years making me look like a criminal. I could wait a few more days to make sure everyone heard exactly who the real thief was. Back at Nathaniel's office, the evidence folder had tripled in size. We could release this today, he said. Destroy him by dinner and kill the guardianship before he files it. No. Nathaniel looked at me. Why not? Because if we destroy him quietly, Bradley still gets to tell everyone he was the loyal son protecting the company from his unstable father. I want the people whose trust he abused watching when the truth comes out. Nathaniel leaned back, already understanding. Annual shareholder meeting, 9 days from now. Full board, major investors, press credentials at the door. Then that's our courtroom. Those 9 days became the busiest stretch of my life in years. Nathaniel built the legal case. Monica stopped working nights at the diner and started working out of Nathaniel's spare office. Following every transfer, Bradley thought nobody would ever notice. $320,000 became nearly $600,000 when she uncovered a second shell account. Even Bradley's own accountant had failed to flag. My job was different. I needed the board to listen before Bradley could convince them I belonged under guardianship. So Nathaniel bought me a burner phone, and I started calling directors one by one. Using my regular number was pointless. The name Clifford Wolf had become toxic enough that people hung up before I could finish a sentence. Some calls lasted 30 seconds. Others lasted an hour. But one mattered more than all the rest. Dennis Farrow, chairman of the board. And getting him to hear me out was going to be the hardest part. Dennis finally answered on my 4th attempt. Clifford, I'm going to be honest. A lot of us assumed the worst when everything happened. Bradley's been very convincing. I know. I'm not asking you to believe me over the phone. Give me 9 days. Come to the shareholder meeting with an open mind. If I'm wrong, You'll know within 10 minutes, and you can throw me out yourself. Dennis went quiet. Then his voice softened. You built that company out of a gravel lot on Parsons Avenue. I was there when you signed the first bank loan. In 30 years, I've never known you to bluff about numbers. Another pause. 9 days, Clifford. I'll keep an open mind. That's all I can promise. It wasn't much, but when I hung up, it felt like the first crack in the wall Bradley had built around me. Someone besides Nathaniel and Monica was finally willing to listen. The night before the meeting, Bradley made his last move. My motel phone rang. Somehow he'd found the number. Dad. His voice was nothing like the one outside the prison gate. It was quiet, almost gentle. I've been thinking. Things have gotten ugly. I've said things I regret. Maybe we should talk before tomorrow. Just you and me. No lawyers. No board. I can come over. We can settle this as a family. For 4 seconds, I wanted to believe him. After everything he had done, some stubborn part of me still wanted my son back. What exactly are we settling, Bradley? His answer came too quickly. He could restructure the accounts, step away from day-to-day operations, and return real control of the company to me. In exchange, nobody at tomorrow's meeting needed to hear what had happened. Then he brought Owen into it. He said his son deserved to grow up knowing his grandfather instead of watching the Wolf family destroy itself in court and on television. That was when I understood. Bradley wasn't apologizing. He was bargaining. You know the difference between us? I said. You've spent your whole life believing every problem has a price you can negotiate down. I spent 2 years learning that some debts have to be paid in full. I hung up. The next morning, Bradley had turned the annual shareholder meeting into his own coronation. Chandeliers, open bar, polished presentations, and a slideshow featuring his face almost as often as the Wolf Building Supply logo. He stood behind the podium, telling a ballroom packed with investors and board members that the company had never been stronger. Then the side door opened. I walked in with Nathaniel on one side, Monica on the other, and a stack of documents under my arm thick enough to stop a bullet. Conversations died one table at a time until the entire ballroom was staring at us. Bradley froze for half a second before forcing his smile back into place. Dad, this is a closed event. I kept walking. I own 41% of this company. That makes it my event too. His smile disappeared. Dennis Farrow stood near the front with his arms crossed. I caught his eye and gave him a single nod. 9 days earlier, I had asked him for one thing: keep your eyes open. Then I placed the documents on the table in front of the board. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse Bradley of anything I couldn't prove. After 2 years of imagining this moment from inside a prison cell, I finally had the room, the evidence, and my son standing 10 feet away with nowhere left to hide, so I began with the first number. I started with the Cedar Street account. No speeches, no theatrics, just evidence. I showed the board the money Bradley had moved out of Wolf Building Supply, the Sarasota condo he had listed as a regional sales office despite having no sales staff, and the trust documents used to shift my assets while I was sitting in prison, appealing my conviction. Then Monica's notarized statement appeared on the same screen. Bradley had spent the evening filling with his own face. The transfers came next, more than $300,000 through the first account. Then the second hidden account pushed the total close to $600,000. Finally, Nathaniel put the Sarasota deed on the screen. Bradley Wolf's signature sat at the bottom of the closing documents. For several seconds, nobody said a word. Then Bradley exploded. This is a smear campaign. But his voice had already lost the room. He pointed toward me. He's unstable. That's why we were exploring guardianship in the first place. You all read the article. I looked straight at him. Exploring it? You filed for guardianship 4 days after planting that story with a reporter, and 3 days before you knew I could prove nearly $600,000 was missing from this company. I let the room absorb. That isn't concern for my mental health, Bradley. That's timing. Near the back of the ballroom, Kayla stood with Owen asleep against her shoulder. She wasn't watching her husband anymore. She was watching the exit. Bradley's composure finally cracked. You don't understand. I was protecting the company from you. You were reckless. You were going to destroy everything like you always. I was in prison. That stopped him. I turned toward the board. And since Bradley wants to question my mental state, maybe everyone here should know how I ended up there. The room went silent again. The night Kayla fell, she told police I shoved her down those stairs. Bradley backed her story. I was arrested that night. I looked toward Kayla. She had stopped moving. 11 days later, Kayla lost the pregnancy. Her own obstetrician found no injury consistent with that fall and nothing medically connecting what happened on those stairs to the miscarriage. Then, I looked back at my son. That report gave you a choice, Bradley. You could have corrected the story before my case ever reached a jury. His face changed. But you didn't. I stepped closer to the board table. Kayla repeated the accusation under oath. You backed her. You let a jury hear the same story, even after the medical evidence failed to support it. And then you watched your 71-year-old father go to prison for 2 years. Nobody moved. Bradley opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I didn't need him to confess. The timeline was already sitting in front of 200 people. Kayla turned toward the exit. Her heels struck the marble faster with every step until the doors closed behind her. Bradley stayed where he was, standing beneath the Wolf Building Supply logo while the security officers who had called him Sir for 2 years moved toward the podium. Dennis Farrow rose from his seat. I'm calling an emergency vote. My 41% combined with another 38% from investors who had just watched nearly $600,000 in hidden transfers. Scroll across the screen gave us more than enough. Before the catering staff finished clearing the appetizer trays, Bradley Wolf was removed as CEO of Wolf Building Supply. He didn't argue when security approached him. He just looked at me as they escorted him toward the doors. 2 years earlier, Bradley had watched another set of doors close behind me. This time, I watched them close behind him. But losing the company was only the beginning. That afternoon, the board turned everything over to investigators. The Cedar Street records, the shell accounts, the Sarasota deed, and every transfer Monica had uncovered. Nathaniel also tracked down Patty Ruiz. Once she learned Bradley no longer controlled the company, she agreed to cooperate. She told investigators how Bradley had pressured her to approve paperwork she knew was wrong, then handed over records she had kept before disappearing. Within weeks, prosecutors had enough to charge Bradley with embezzlement and falsifying business records. Rather than take his chances before a jury, he accepted a plea deal. By the 6th week after my release, the board had formally restored me to my old office on the 42nd floor, mine again. One of the first documents I signed created the Clifford Wolf Legal Fund, $5 million set aside to help elderly people being financially exploited or railroaded by their own families. Across from me sat Monica Diaz. No crooked diner name tag anymore. She wore a Navy suit and looked like she had belonged in that office her entire life. I had appointed her CFO 11 days after the shareholder meeting. The board questioned my decision exactly once. Then Monica uncovered a third hidden account that every accountant before her had missed. Nobody questioned her again. How's Rosa? I asked. Monica smiled. Loves the new school. She wants to know if you're coming to her soccer game Saturday. Apparently she's told the whole team her boss brings the good orange slices. Tell her I'm not missing it. And I'm bringing the good ones. That Saturday, I stood beside a beat-up soccer field behind an elementary school in German Village with a plastic bag of orange slices in one hand and a folding chair I never used. I was too busy yelling toward the field. Rosa! Get back on defense. Monica stood beside me in a windbreaker instead of a Navy suit, laughing so hard at my sideline coaching that she nearly missed Rosa scoring her only goal of the season. For 2 years, I had sat in a cell believing the only family I had left was the family that put me there. I never imagined the people I actually needed would enter my life through a cup of diner coffee. After the game, Rosa came running toward us with mud covering her cleats and a grin stretched across her face. She wrapped both arms around my waist before I could react. Did you see it? Did you see my goal? Every second of it. Best goal I've seen all year. Rosa narrowed her eyes. You haven't watched any other games. Monica burst out laughing. That's beside the point, I said. Rosa ran back toward her teammates, and I watched her go. Those were the moments prison had really stolen from me. Not houses, not cars, not boardrooms. Moments I could never buy back. The following Monday, I was in my office when the intercom interrupted a meeting. My assistant sounded uncomfortable. Mr. Wolf, there's a collect call for you. It's Bradley. 2 years earlier, I would have answered before she finished saying his name. That version of me didn't make it out of Chillicothe. I watched the line blink twice. Put him through. Speaker. The connection crackled, and immediately I recognized the sounds behind him. Steel doors, distant voices, hard walls, and a prison phone designed to remind you that privacy was another thing you no longer owned. Bradley had been sentenced the week before to 8 years for embezzlement and falsifying business records. After Patty agreed to cooperate and investigators traced the Cedar Street money through the shell accounts, his lawyers knew a trial could leave him facing far worse. He took the plea deal, 8 years in exchange for avoiding the risk of a much longer sentence. Dad, Bradley didn't sound like a CEO anymore. You have to help me. The lawyer here is useless. They're saying I might not even get a parole review for 6 years. 6 years, Dad. I know what prison feels like. I need money for an appeal. At least put something on my commissary account. The food here is terrible. I know. I ate it for 2 years. His breathing changed. Then he reached for the last weapon he thought still worked. Blood is thicker than water, Dad. You always said that. He was right. I had said it for most of my life. I had used those words to excuse things I should have confronted years earlier. I did say that. Bradley went quiet. But blood can go bad too. And when something poisoned is killing the rest of you, you don't keep it just because it belongs to you. Dad, I ended the call. No argument. No final threat. Just one click. The silence afterward didn't hurt. It felt like putting down a weight I had carried so long I'd forgotten what standing straight felt like. Monica was waiting in the doorway for our next meeting. You okay? I looked at her, then out across Columbus, the German village rooftops below, the river catching the afternoon light. The same city that had watched me lose my freedom, my reputation, and almost everything I owned. Better than okay. I'm free. For most of my life, I believed family was determined by blood. I know better now. Family is the person who waits outside the prison gate in the rain. It's the woman willing to tell the truth after honesty has already cost her once. It's the little girl who expects you at her soccer game because she never considered the possibility that you wouldn't show up. I lost a son who saw me as an obstacle between himself and everything I owned. In return, I found people who saw me as a man worth standing beside. There was another soccer game Saturday. Rosa expected me there, and I already knew I was bringing the good orange slices. Given the choice, I'd make that trade every single time.